The alien language in the film is like a romantic ink painting. All of this is beyond the understanding of ordinary people, and as the female lead who is the only one can decipher the language, how can she stop the catastrophe of war with the aliens? Let's focus our attention on the female lead. She is named Darcy. She is a top linguist. Darcy works at a prestigious university. When Darcy arrived at the school that day, she noticed something was off. The students were anxiously staring at the TV. There weren't many people in the classroom. She didn't pay much attention and started her class. Then a student asked her to turn on the TV news. After Darcy turned it on, she realized that something big had happened in the world. Soon, the alarm sounded throughout the school. The school sent all the teachers and students home. After Darcy arrived home, she continued watching the news. It turned out that 12 alien spacecraft had appeared worldwide. Each one was over 400 meters tall. This event caused widespread panic among humans. People started panic buying food, fresh water, and oil. A military colonel approached Darcy voluntarily. The colonel admired Darcy's language abilities, so he played a deep and brief sound recording. He asked her to translate the alien language, but Darcy said that it was impossible to translate based on the recording alone. She needed to communicate with them in person. The colonel took her on a helicopter. Physicist Joe also accompanied them. Darcy was responsible for communicating with the aliens. Joe was in charge of deeper-level questions. For example, how did the aliens come to Earth? And so on. When the helicopter approached the alien spacecraft, Darcy looked through the window. She saw a large number of civilians gathered near the military ship's fence. The scene was very spectacular. As they moved forward, the mysterious alien spacecraft appeared. The entire ship had no waste or emissions, and there was no radiation. It was just suspended in mid-air. Smoke swirled below, like a dream. Darcy entered the temporary military camp. A group of world-class scientists gathered here. They communicated with each other through video connections. Darcy and Joe put on protective suits. They followed the colonel to the vicinity of the spacecraft. The colonel said, "Every 18 hours, the ship opens a gap, and it closes after 2 hours. Currently, the mainstream view in the world is that the aliens have created a breathable environment inside the ship. However, this state can only be maintained for 2 hours. Then the gap opened, and they started to ascend on the elevator. Above was a long vertical corridor. When the elevator reached the top, a soldier threw a glow stick upwards. Surprisingly, the glow stick stopped on the wall. There was almost no gravity in the corridor. The soldier jumped upward and stood on the vertical corridor. Darcy was somewhat scared, but she was still pulled up by Colonel. Joe also tried to jump, but he fell flat on his face the next second. Then they arrived in front of a piece of transparent glass with smoke swirling inside. The soldiers began setting up cameras, and they also brought a canary. It was used to confirm the safety of the air. Then, accompanied by deep gasps, the aliens finally appeared. They were 2 giant 7-legged creatures. Each of their tentacles had 7 smaller tentacles, like an octopus. Their first encounter quickly came to an end. Colonel just took the 2 of them for a simple tour. Meanwhile, the events outside had evolved into riots, with frequent acts of terror. Before their second entry into the spacecraft, Darcy brought a writing board. She believed that the sounds produced by the 7-legged creatures were too difficult to understand, and if they had a written language, she would find it easier to comprehend. This writing board would help stimulate them to write language. When Darcy wrote down the word human on the board, the 7-legged creatures drew a strange circle on the glass. There are many branches on the circle. This seems to be their language. Substantial progress has been made in communication between humans and aliens. All of this is thanks to Darcy. After they returned, Colonel couldn't wait to have Darcy ask the purpose of the 7-legged creatures coming to Earth. Darcy said that expressing this sentence is not easy. We need to create our own vocabulary, which will take a long time. On her third entry into the spacecraft, Darcy looked at the canary next to her, and realized that the air was fine, so she immediately took off her protective suit. Joe also took off his protective suit. When the 2 of them showed their names, the 7-legged creatures also displayed their names, and communication made further progress. After they returned, there were no signs of poisoning in Darcy's body. It appears that the air inside the spaceship is indeed safe, and the aliens have no malicious intent. After some time, Darcy gradually mastered the alien language. She discovered that the 7-legged creatures' writing system had no correlation, and their written language lacked a linear system. This is referred to as a non-linear spelling system by linguists. The 7-legged creatures can easily write complex sentences in 2 seconds, while it takes humans a month to produce the simplest response. It seems that the 7-legged creatures are very intelligent. Ever since Darcy learned the alien language, her thoughts involuntarily drift to another world. In this world, she has a daughter named Hannah, which can easily be associated with the 7-legged creature's spelling system. Hannah's fate was unfortunate. as she fell seriously ill and passed away at a young age. At first, Darcy thought she was experiencing an illusion, and didn't pay much attention to it. Since Darcy had been studying the alien language for some time, Colonel requested her to ask the purpose of the aliens coming here to the seven-legged creatures. After Darcy arrived at the alien spacecraft, she translated the sentence about the purpose into the alien language, and displayed it on the computer screen. However, the response she received was to provide weapons. Upon seeing this, the military panicked instantly, despite Darcy's efforts to explain that the seven-legged creatures might not understand the difference between weapons and tools, and that they might intend to provide tools. The military did not believe her. Meanwhile, other countries also received the same message, and believed that the seven-legged creatures intended to instigate a civil war among humans. Consequently, they started to disconnect their video connections one by one. On the other side, some soldiers who were not calm sneaked into the alien spacecraft, and planted numerous bombs that would detonate in 10 minutes. At this moment, the confused Darcy and Joe also returned to the spacecraft. They asked the seven-legged creatures what they meant by providing weapons, but the creatures didn't respond. They simply tapped on the glass to beckon Darcy over. The moment Darcy touched the screen, she seemed to receive a sensation, and she immediately started drawing along with the gestures of the seven-legged creatures. In this way, she completely learned the alien language. Afterwards, the seven-legged creatures sprayed a large amount of ink on the glass, leaving behind an ink-splattered image. At this moment, the bombs were about to detonate, and the seven-legged creatures seemed to have sensed it. They promptly shook Darcy and Joe away, and after the explosion occurred, they closed the door voluntarily. The male and female lead only suffered minor concussions, and they quickly recovered after being brought back to the base camp. Although this attack was the fault of humans, the incident had already occurred, and the US military had no choice but to cut off communication with the seven-legged creatures. They started preparing for war, and other countries did the same. While everyone was discussing nervously, the alien spacecraft flew up into the sky, making communication even more difficult. In the evening, Darcy discovered that the ink-splattered image left by the seven-legged creatures contained numerous small circles, which would take several years to fully decipher. Joe, who has a broader perspective, figured out within a few hours that it was an ultra-high-speed equation, but only 1/12 of it. Clearly, other countries which discovered spaceships had also received 1/12 each, and only by uniting could humanity piece together the complete equation. That was the reason the seven-legged creatures brought 12 spaceships. Darcy immediately informed the military about this, but they believed that the battle was about to begin and that no one would care about it. They argued among themselves. Suddenly, a small spaceship flashed in Darcy's mind. She quickly ran outside, and saw a small ship detaching from the larger spacecraft and landing on the ground. She walked inside. Darcy entered the interior of the alien spacecraft, and saw the full appearance of the seven-legged creature for the first time. It was much larger than she had imagined, with a massive upper body on its tentacles, and a head without any facial features. The seven-legged creature said to Darcy, "We have already handed over the weapons to you. Please use them. We will need the help of humanity in 3,000 years. Darcy didn't understand and asked, "How can you predict the future? And who is the little girl named Hannah?" The seven-legged creature replied with 2 sentences. "Weapons can open time, and now you can also predict the future." Darcy instantly understood that the people she saw in her mind were her future self, and Hannah was her future daughter. However, Darcy still didn't understand what the weapons were, and before she could ask further, she was sent back to the ground. At that moment, the alien spacecraft suddenly turned sideways, and Colonel started organizing the evacuation of personnel. After returning, Darcy tested her ability to predict the future, and learned that one day in the future, she would publish a book about the translation of the alien language. Then she understood that the so-called weapons were the alien language. As long as she learned this language, she could perceive time and predict the future. Darcy immediately informed Colonel about this, but Colonel insisted on the evacuation. To prevent humanity from starting a war, Darcy continued to search for a solution from the future. This time, she learned that one day in the future, a Chinese general would give her his private number, and his wife's dying words. So she immediately stole a high-ranking military officer's phone and, before being shot, told the Chinese general the dying words. The Chinese general was deeply moved and immediately announced release military alert. Other countries followed suit and abandoned the plan to initiate war. At the same time, countries around the world united once again to exchange information. Finally, they successfully pieced together the formula for ultra-high-speed equation. The seven-legged creature's spaceship turned into smoke and vanished into the sky. This extraterrestrial crisis came to a satisfactory conclusion. Darcy's story continues, and her ability to learn the alien language makes her destined for extraordinary things. Ordinary people like us live our lives linearly. We only know the past, not the future. But Darcy is different. She knows clearly what events will occur throughout her life. Even when she makes a choice, she knows the future that follows that choice. Similarly, her future choices will also affect the present, creating a closed loop similar to the alien language. At this moment, Jo gently tapped Darcy's shoulder. Darcy immediately foresaw that she would marry Jo in the future, and they would have a daughter named Hannah. Then she would tell Jo that their daughter would die. Jo would unable to accept this fact and choose to leave. Then Darcy would raise their daughter alone, until she fell ill and died. Darcy knew that being with Jo was a terrible choice, yet she still embraced him willingly, accepting her own fate. The film ends there. I believe that Darcy, being the only person who understands the alien language, knows that every choice she makes will determine the fate of humanity, so she cannot easily change it. It is also possible that Darcy feels no regret for her initial life choices. At the end of the film, she says that she is still prepared to embrace every moment of the fate. I was deeply moved when I heard those final words. In short, it means not regretting the life one has chosen. The visuals throughout the film are captivating, and the narrative approach from a linguistic perspective adds multiple layers of depth to the movie. The film is adapted from a collection of science fiction short stories called Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang, published in 1998. The book won the Nebula Award and Theodore Sturgeon Memorial Award that year. The film involves a non-linear timeline where the beginning is the end, and the end is also the beginning. The creative inspiration for the alien language comes from the Zen concept of Zen Circle, which represents absolute power, elegance, the universe, and emptiness. Credit goes to director Dennis and screenwriter Heisera for creating a genuinely unique alien language, which made my immersion into the film incredibly authentic. I believe that after watching this film, each of you as viewers will have many deeper thoughts. When you have the ability to foresee the future, would you be happy or sad? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. See you next time.